Hi, we're gonna get this started here today. This is, I believe, our second or third Cat Chat of the semester on September 18th, 2018. My name is Matthew Burnett, and I'm presenting about suicide amongst college students. And with me is Ali Yancey. We are certified peer educators who work with counseling services here at K-State to provide mental health education to other student groups and the student body in general about a number of different mental health related topics just to increase awareness and decrease stigma. And you see that we're wearing purple shirts here with this little logo that just kind of indicates which organization we're a part of. We're with PAWS, which stands for Peer Advocates for Mental Wellness and Success. And if you're looking for something to get involved in, that would be a great opportunity, especially if you're passionate about the subject. We can always use more people who are passionate about mental health. There's my soliciting for the presentation. We can get into the actual material now. We also have to mention that the information we got was taken from a previous presentation created by one of the clinical psychologists we have on staff. Her name's Cody Walls. So, all right, let's get started.
Awesome. So the topic for today is suicidality among college students. And so we're kind of just gonna go over some risk factors, and we're gonna try to go through signs, and then what to do to help, and then how to refer people. So we'll start off by talking about depression, because a lot of people who consider suicide tend to have a mental illness. And so it's really important to be able to tell if someone is having depression or something like that. And so depression is increasingly common among college students. And so among a lot of different universities, it's kind of been on the rise. A lot of people have been referred to counseling, and it just seems like it's been a more prevalent issue. And in 2016, 137 students reported moderate to significant concern about intentions of suicide. And 221 indicated moderate to significant concerns about recent thoughts of suicide. So because this is becoming a bigger issue, we want to talk about it and learn what to do about it.
Yeah. So why is this important for you to know this information? Obviously, if the situation progresses to a certain point, we aren't of the education to really help with someone who's at increased risk for suicide. But why is it important for you to know these skills? Well, it's because, as it says here in the slides, research suggests that close to half of suicidal students do not tell anyone. A small percentage currently see a therapist. So really, the community that surrounds these suicidal students are the biggest influence in their lives, and they have the greatest ability to help them along that journey for them to potentially save their lives. So it's important for everyone to know this information, not just for someone who's in the profession.
Mm-hmm. And understanding your role, so like Matt said, being a student and a friend to someone is that's a huge role for someone who is struggling with this, because community is extremely important. So as a friend of someone, to be able to learn the warning signs and to be able to know the resources and connect the person to help is a really big role that we have. And the mental health professionals and counselors are also very important, but it almost starts with people's peers and their friends. So we have a big role in preventing this, and so, yeah.
Absolutely. So we like to start off in our education about suicide awareness and prevention by understanding the different signs of distress, which is there are two forms of stress, eustress and distress. Distress is the negative form of stress. And there's several factors that you can look for that will kind of clue you into kind of which de-stresses a student might be feeling that could kind of lead to them having suicidal tendencies. These things might include easily being overwhelmed by situations, which they had previously not been overwhelmed about, decreased academic performance, significant physical changes that might be, body composition or just the way that they maintain their hygiene, stuff like that. Strange behaviors and impaired thinking. This is obviously, you are going to be, these people, what they're typically like. And so it's just any behavior that's out of the normal for them. They might be acting very strange. Intense emotional reactions, maybe a little heightened. People who are often in suicidal, depressed states are manic in certain ways, so they have higher highs and lower lows, and that's pretty easy to see from time to time. And then threatening statements and behavior, and that's kind of the biggest one that you would automatically assume would be something that you would be looking for, but the others of them not so much.
And some more signs would be through like distress and also depression. And so some symptoms of depression would include feeling irritable or just crying for no reason, feeling hopeless probably, withdrawing from social contacts, sadness or low mood, loss of interest in activities, feeling worthless or guilty, and restless or slowed movements in speech. So if you have a friend who like maybe usually loves to do a certain activity and then all of a sudden isn't doing that anymore for an extended period of time, that's a good reason to be concerned and to ask them about it, or to, just to show concern for them.
Absolutely. So is this, when you're dealing with a friend or a peer who is showing suicidal tendencies, is this clinical depression where you need to refer them to a therapist or a counselor, or is just something that you can handle at home? It's easy to think that when you know the symptoms and signs that you kind of cluing in, you're kind of drawing too many conclusions. It's not our job. We are not professionals at it. We are just students, and we're friends, and we're peers. So just being aware of what these symptoms are, it can kind of give us a better idea of what their mental state is at the time, to where we can direct them to where someone else can better help them. So we're the first line of support for these people. And then an important point to remember is to watch for the aforementioned signs, and refer any student you may be thinking about may be depressed to a mental health professional, as I had mentioned. So that's a very important point to notice, is that it is not our jobs to diagnose or be the last line of help for them, because that's a lot of pressure for us.
Also, I just want to add, if you guys have any questions throughout, you can just raise your hand, or a clarifying question or anything, and we can answer this. But we'll also have a time at the end to answer questions. Okay, so also about depression. Depression, these are just some facts about it. Depression is not a sign of weakness. It's a condition, and it affects people, and of all nationalities, cultures, it affects all people. It's not just a certain type of person or anything like that. It will not just go away if it is ignored. Someone could be depressed for a couple weeks, and you might think, oh, it'll go away in a little bit if I don't have to address it. But it's definitely something that needs to be addressed, and people can get through it if they are able to have coping mechanisms. And it's just very important to not ignore the signs. And although most depressed people are not suicidal, most suicidal people are clinically depressed. So it's a very important thing to take note of.
Absolutely. So then all of the background that we had previously mentioned kind of leads us to this main point, which is why you guys are here today, about the topic of suicide itself. Suicide is a permanent solution to a temporary problem. And what this means, another way of saying that, is that it's more of an impulsive act. Most students who are suicidal seriously contemplate suicide for 1 day or less. So the act itself is more impulsive and immediate than it is a long time consideration. But not to say that it's black and white. There could be cases where that is true. Coping strategies. Suicide is often seen as a means to an end of an unbearable pain. Most people don't want to die. They just want the pain to end. And then that is a very important point to take away from this. So if you remember anything from this slide, is that most people don't want to die. They just want the pain to end.
So we're going to go through a couple of facts about suicide that kind of defeat some misconceptions that people often have. So the first one is that asking about suicide in a straightforward and caring way will not make one suicidal. It will convey your concern and invite disclosure. It's common to think that if you bring up the topic, or if you ask a friend, hey, have you thought about suicide? We like worry that they will start thinking about it. Like we put the idea in their head. But actually that's not the case. Usually like people can't put ideas into their head. Like usually if you ask, people will be like, oh no, like no, I'm not doing it. Or they might be like, actually, yeah. And then you showed concern, and then like, it's a really, really important question that we'll talk about later too.
Yeah.
But yeah, asking about it won't do harm to them.
Is anyone surprised by that a little bit? Or yeah.
Uh-huh.
I know some people in here have taken some mental health classes prior, so they already know a little bit about it. Fact about suicide number 2. Warning signs are often presented prior to serious suicidal attempts. So that one's pretty straightforward. So you can kind of see why it's important for you to know what these warning signs are, because the sooner that we address them and see them, and the sooner we're able to get our friends the help that they need, and then the less of a threat that it's going to be to them, and the safer they'll be. So that's the main takeaway from this presentation as a whole, is to understand what those warning signs are, and to get it, to address those and get them the help as soon as they can.
Mm-hmm.
So timeliness is a priority.
Most people are ambivalent about suicide. Very often it can be prevented. So kind of like what we said before, it's a permanent solution to a temporary problem. And so it's actually, I mean, we say solution, but it's like, it can be prevented. That does not have to be the solution. Like if we are like able to recognize signs and get people the help that they need, it's preventable. So yeah.
So gender differences in suicide and depression. This one's kind of, when I first went through and learned about this, I found it to be the most interesting and kind of intriguing. Is that, often because of social norms, young men tend to mask their emotions a little bit better than girls, just based off, what's socially acceptable to do and what's socially acceptable not to do. So it's a little harder to detect in men than it is for women. And that obviously, like other things, it's not black and white. There could be cases where, women are also very good at masking their emotions, but overall, in a general case, young men tend to mask their emotions. So that's something on a national level that we're trying to address through the mental health stigma reduction, and allowing people to openly express their emotions, to where, that difference isn't so great and apparent. Young men often exhibit their depression in forms of anger, physical complications, and increased alcohol use. I don't think any of those behaviors are surprising to people, just because that's pretty typical of how people express their emotions, especially in American society. Whereas young women are more likely to attempt suicide, young men are 4 to 6 times more likely to complete suicide than young women. Anyone in the audience, a little participation here, know why that is the case? Absolutely. For the people who are listening online, she said that they use more lethal weapons, and that's absolutely right. They tend to use things more like guns or knives, or very more lethal ways to where it, for lack of better terms, gets the job done kind of deal, which is truly unfortunate.
So what are the risk factors for suicide? So what are some things that we can look out for, and signs that we can notice? So a big one is hopelessness. And this also very much goes along with depression, a symptom of depression. It's like just the sense that nothing is going to get better, like nothing is going to improve their situation. Easy access to means of harming themselves. So for example, it says like a gun or pills. Like if someone has the means, it's just a lot more of a risk. There's a lot more of a risk because it's like you need to be willing and able to do it. And if they're able, like that just increases the risk all the more. History of past suicide attempts or suicide in the family, that can increase someone's risk if they have experienced that before. Recent major loss, whether it's social or academic. So if someone's lost a family member, a friend, or anybody they know, that's very devastating and can put people in a really bad place. Likewise, academically, if someone fails a class or like loses financial aid or something, that can be really stressful and just cause people to go in a really dark place too. Impulsive or aggressive tendencies. This is more like behavior signs that you might notice in someone. Also with alcohol and other substance abuse, there's usually like an increase in that if people are having these feelings. Untreated mental illness, especially depression, bipolar disorder, and psychosis. This is a huge one. Also, yeah, mental illness is very serious, which we've tried to like portray, but definitely needs to be like treated and addressed. Lack of social support, and resistance to seeking help. These are all things that might increase someone's risk, or like signs that you might see that could be a warning sign for you.
Yeah, absolutely. And this slide kind of reiterates what Allie had said, losing or the students, specific situations where students show these risk factors are losing important relationships throughout your college relationships. Past that, it's a very traumatic experience. Academic losses, like she said, failing a class, not being into the program that you're trying to get into. She had mentioned financial aid, and then loss of a support system when you go away from college. I think that's very big for people to be aware of, especially, for a high majority of the people on campus are first-year students, and that kind of when you're older and you've gone through it all, you kind of forget how hard it is to move away for the first time and not having people in your life you've always had. So, especially as a senior in college now, sometimes I forget how hard that was as a freshman. So those are definitely factors that contribute, for sure.
So some sources of stress, like Matt said, like we are in a unique position as students. It's just a unique part of our lives. And so for you guys, what are some like key sources of stress? Like what are things that always stress you out? I'm gonna give you the mic too. If anything, you can just raise your hand and I'll come to you. Okay.
Homework. Finances.
Yeah, that's a big one. Yeah. Anyone else? You're not stressed? That's incredible.
Yeah.
Tell me your secrets. All right, well, we have a list of our own here. More specifically related to the people we're reviewing today, undergraduate students. This includes things such as academic rigor and demands, more than they're accustomed to, having to get used to the demands of a college class. First generation to attend college and all of the struggles that go along with the college atmosphere that are not academically related. And that kind of goes along with the first generation isolation from family and friends, something that doesn't have to do with the academics, that is equally stressful to an undergrad student, not having that support system like we had said prior. Exposure to new beliefs and people. Obviously there's a lot of different people here and from a lot of different backgrounds and cities, and then different classes that challenge the way that you grew up. And then that could be stressful when you get a lot of different ideas going around. And then kind of formulating your own thoughts outside of what your parents thought when you were kids. Drug and alcohol play a huge impact. Drugs and alcohol are also huge factors that play a role in the impulsivity of suicide, because it alters your mental state and it increases the likelihood of impulsive behaviors. So that's a huge one to take note of. Overwhelmed by university experiences, that kind of reiterates what we've been talking about prior. Isolation, living on your own, residential living environment, family problems, disenchantment from college, lack of support system from majority culture. So those all kind of run along the same lines and then follows the same trend of things that we have found to be common stressors for undergrad students. And then do you want to talk about grad students?
Yeah, so for grad students, it might naturally be a little bit different because they're in a different position. So like for them, it might be intense academic demands or like competition and isolation. I think for a lot of people, it's hard to balance work, school, and home life because I think a lot of grad school students might be non-traditional, so they might have families or other things that undergrad students might not have. And also anxiety around oral exams or like theses, stuff like that. Those can be really stressful just because it's also a ton of work. Yeah, relationship with advisors, departmental politics, and questioning academic path. Just a lot of like, I don't know, it's like undergrad stress, and then like it's almost, sometimes it can be on another level of stress. They're both stressful though. And then just decisions around career and yeah, family life, and also just like issues with gender politics. There can just be a whole like a wide variety of like stressors that grad students might have. So those are some of them.
Absolutely. And also be aware that, you know, the stressors that are more tended towards graduate students, the undergraduate stressors are also common amongst them. They just have more things that stress them out, which is probably why everyone says, oh man, you're going to grad school, good luck. There's a reason, you know? Okay, so several protective factors reduce the risk of suicide. So we've been talking about the factors that are negative, so we can flip it onto the positive side. And if you're trying to create a positive, conducive environment for someone who's at risk, these are things that you would be looking to do. Strong social support network. This kind of goes along with what we've been saying the entire time, is that the less isolation and the more people that care surrounding them is the number one way to show that they're valued, that they're cared about, and that decreases the likelihood. Easy access and willingness to participate in mental health care. Obviously, that goes along again with isolation. And then the willingness, we bolded, I don't know if you can tell, but they need to be willing to go and seek help themselves. You can't force them into anything because they're not going to get anything out of it if they're not willing to put in the effort. So getting them to be in a position to be willing to get the help, willing to change, that is the biggest step that they need to take. Restricted access to lethal means. So if you have a friend who is contemplating suicide, and then you ask if they have any means or if they have any plans, and they say, yeah, I have XYZ, it's important to eliminate, especially in the beginning when you first hear about it, and it's more of an immediate thing you need to attend to. Get those out of the situation, and then make sure that they're constantly, you know, supported and surrounded. Don't leave them alone, and get rid of anything that could potentially be lethal. Cultural and religious beliefs that discourage suicide and promote self-preservation. And that just kind of goes along with the supports and social network, is that they feel valued and they have a sense of purpose and identity, and then beliefs that they want life pretty much. And then meaningful commitments and obligations. So if they can think about the future, what they want out of that. So having kids or getting a pet, something they can take care of, that means they're thinking about the future and then them being a part of that. So having any commitments or goals that they can set, you can set with them, is an important thing to do. I like to do that myself.
So how can you help? So if you have a friend who comes to you and you have a lot of concern for them, like, what are you supposed to do? That's kind of a scary situation. So we're going to go over a couple of like things to do, but expressing your concern directly and offering to help is always a good, you know, a good standard way of helping someone. Being willing to listen and without judging them. And then also like using a team approach, like consulting with others, whether that's like a mental health professional or if it's just someone who you trust to talk with it about. I think it's really important to make sure that you're not the only one who someone has told, or you're not the only like contact that somebody has, just because it's the more people that can help like as a team, the better. Yeah, go ahead.
So tips, things that you can do as you initiate these conversations and you initiate helping someone who's at risk. We're going to start with the do's, and Allie will continue with the don'ts. Do find time to talk privately without distractions. So this is a personal subject and something that the person is dealing with inside their head, and that can often be very intimate to them. And so being able to talk with them privately to where they feel secure talking to you is very important. And then minimizing distractions to where they're really focusing on the conversation, and that just shows where they're at in the conversation, where they're not, it goes back to the willingness thing. If they're distracted and they're looking all around, I mean, they're not very willing to be participating in that conversation. So minimize any distractions. Communicate your concern to the other person, and be specific. What have you noticed that has raised concern? So point out to them the things that have kind of made you want to bring up this conversation. Say, I have seen you have not been taking care of yourself. You've been acting strange in these specific ways. And then bring that to their attention to where there's nothing that you're kind of hiding back, to where if you're open in the conversation, you're saying everything that is concerning to you, and they feel more comfortable to reach out and express their feelings and emotions. And that kind of goes back to the community aspect of it too. Just surround them and make them feel part of a community and loved. And then ask how they're feeling and listen to what they have to say. And this is a very important point, because a lot of people, there's a difference between listening and active listening. So, nodding your head, making eye contact, and then saying, continuing for like words like, go ahead, sure, stuff like that, to really show that you're listening to every word that they say and that everything they say is important to you. And then ask if they have been thinking about suicide. Are you feeling so bad that you thought about hurting yourself? That we said that earlier on in the slide is one of the facts, is that it is important to ask that conversation, and right up front too. So then that kind of directs where your conversation goes from there. If you sit down and say, hey, I'm concerned for you. Are you contemplating suicide? Yes. All right. You're going an immediate route to getting you to a healthcare professional who can help you right now, so you're not at immediate risk. No. Okay, that kind of distinguishes where you go and then how you can best help. So that's important. And then be supportive, remain calm, and then show you care. Those are obviously very important points that I feel like everyone would kind of already assume. But remaining calm, we understand, unless you've been through the situation before, it's very, it's scary, especially if it's someone you care about. And no one's going to be perfect at it, but as long as you make that choice and make that initiative to talk to them, they'll notice you're nervous, but they know you care. So that's all that really matters.
Also, just to add to that, like the best advice that I've received about how to talk to a friend who's considered this is like, just be curious. So like if someone's presenting concerns and like they maybe mention something that's kind of concerning, like listen to them and be like, ask questions, like the more information you get, the better. And like when they see that you're caring about what they're saying, it's like, that just like helps, so yeah, just like, don't be afraid to ask questions.
And it's not like you're being intrusive. It's showing an interest in where they're at, because up to that point, they're all in their heads, and everything, all the thoughts they've kept private. And so sharing them with you kind of relieves that stress to an extent. So as many probing questions as you can, and just fully understand where they're at and then how you can best help them. So the more questions, the more specific ways you can help them from there.
And now, so for some don'ts, some of these might be kind of obvious, but others not as much. So don't be judgmental or argue with them about their feelings or choices. So if someone's feeling something, they're feeling it, and we can't tell them that they're not. And so don't try to diagnose or analyze the person. That can make someone feel kind of like attacked a little bit. Don't minimize their feelings. Don't ignore comments about suicide. That is a huge one. We should always take comments like that very seriously, like extremely seriously. Don't be sworn to secrecy. Like if someone tells you, yeah, I've been thinking about this, like don't tell anybody. Like you cannot do that, because the way to help is to tell people. And so if someone asks you to do that, the best thing to do is to just be honest and say, I'm really sorry, I care about you too much to not tell someone, Don't forget to seek support and consultation for yourself. It's a really nerve-wracking situation, and it can be hard for both people, and it can feel like a lot of pressure. And so, yeah, don't hesitate to talk to someone about it. I think a couple of the hotlines, like the national hotlines, if you call, like the person who you're concerned about, they can call, but you can also call and ask for like advice, but also to just like talk to people. Like it's resources for both parties. Don't try to handle the crisis alone. That's a big one. And then don't be afraid to set limits. So if someone tries to like, I don't know, if it just becomes overbearing, like that's why it's important to have multiple like help, like multiple people helping. So yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Along with you helping them, you also need to take care of yourself.
Mm-hmm.
This kind of goes along the analogy we like to use when we were learning it ourselves, is that when you go in to help someone who's drowning, they'll pull you down under to try to protect themselves. So you need to make sure to protect yourself and then help yourself in the process to where you can, if you're protecting yourself, then you can best help them. So
Mm-hmm.
Asking about suicide can be challenging. Obviously, this is a very sensitive subject for us to be talking about, and it's often times really hard to present on because it is a taboo subject, especially in American culture. People are stigmatized by talking about it. Depression and mental illnesses are often seen as preventable and or non-existent, and that it's not a real thing. And along with what Allie and I try to do is we like to try to reduce the stigma surrounding these topics. But unfortunately, the stigma still exists today. And so just being aware of where it's at and where the topic is at is very important as you bring up these conversations with people. Practice makes perfect, obviously. If anyone's involved in sports or play or anything, the more you practice, the better you get at it. So if you practice these talks in your head, you might be thinking, man, that's hard. I don't know how I'm going to be able to do that. Well, if you kind of give it a test run and in a practice situation, if you give it a test run in a practice situation, then you'll feel more comfortable when it comes time for game day. Yeah. And then by asking the question, you give the student permission to reveal this information. Most people who aren't suicidal will tell you so. Asking someone about suicide will not put that idea in their head. That's a very important last point to distinguish, is that you bringing up that conversation doesn't put that idea in their head. For you to bring up the conversation with them would warrant their behavior is kind of already indicating that they've thought about it. And so you're not putting that idea in their head. You're just getting it out of their head to where it's not just something that they're thinking about on their own. It's out in the open, it's public. It's where you can help them. And then if student denies that they're suicidal, go with your gut. It's an intimate subject. It's difficult to talk about. And if someone denies it, it's because they're very struggling with it. So just you know them, what their common behaviors are. Just go with your gut. And if you feel like they need help or they need to be monitored, just be really cognizant of their behavior because it's better to be safe than to be sorry. So.
And also just like asking the question itself, it's just like can be really awkward, or like just like saying the word suicide is kind of like, like it can feel like that. But like if you have any concern, it's better to ask than not, and later be like, I wish I asked, like if you have any reason to be concerned, like, it doesn't have to be like this huge thing. Like it can just be a question,
Yeah, it's not like with practice, it's not going to be awkward. It's always going to be awkward.
Right.
It's just practicing is just going to help you be a little more fluid with how you say it. So, yeah.
So what if the student is at suicide risk? So let's say that you have a friend and you've asked them the big question and they're like, actually, yeah, I have thought about it. So like, what do we do? The first thing is like, obviously you want to listen and be a good friend and to like care for them and like validate their feelings. But you also want to really encourage professional help, like counseling or like therapy. And a lot of times people will walk friends to the counseling center, kind of like gives people someone to go with them. It can be really scary. And so just really, really encouraging that for them. And don't take it upon yourself. Like we've mentioned before, don't handle it alone. Like, this is a serious topic, so like find some help. And then also always follow up with them. If you talk to them one day, like text them later that night, or like just continue to like make it known that you were there for them. And then also, if someone does say like that they have been considering it, it's really important. This is also kind of a hard question to ask too, but like it's important to ask like, have you like thought of ways to like, do you have a plan? Because a lot of times people have thought about it and they're like, yeah, like I've thought about it, which is still very serious. But if someone ends up saying like, yeah, I actually like have the way to do it and I like know how I would, like that is like even more so worse situation, which I think is the next slide. But,
Yeah. So yeah, kind of how an easy transition there. Yeah. So if a student is at immediate risk, like she said, if they have a plan, if they have a way to do it, they are at an immediate risk. And so in that situation, the best thing that you can do is to not leave them alone. That allows you to kind of monitor them and make sure that they don't kind of act impulsively. And they feel that sense of community and someone's with them. That's a very huge thing. But at the same time, if someone is seriously unstable and then they're violence and kind of acting irrationally, that could put your own safety at risk. So kind of like the analogy I'd made earlier about, when you try to get someone who's drowning, that they'll pull you down, make sure that you're safe as well, because you want to help them, but you also want to protect yourself. And in that situation where you don't feel like your safety, you don't feel like you're safe if you don't leave them alone, that's when you would consult campus emergency or calling 911. They're your best resources. They're trained and they can get that person to a place where they cannot hurt themselves. So.
And if you ever get into the situation where you decide to call 911, basically what normally happens is they will be taken to a hospital until like people say that they are like stable enough to not like be in that setting.
Yeah, they're mental wards in the hospital to where it's a safe, protected, padded rooms to where they don't have any means to hurt themselves.
Right.
And that kind of how we talked about it earlier, the act is more impulsive, kind of keep them there until that impulsive thought kind of passes. So.
Yeah. So how to refer for counseling. So if you have a friend who you really want to encourage to go to counseling, so like ask them if they've ever thought about it, just like present the idea to them and like explain how it might be helpful. Just like, talking your problems out with someone like just helps so much. Especially to a professional who has a lot of experience with this. And provide information about the counseling center and how to access services, which is something we'll also talk about. And also, like, it's really important to know that counseling is confidential because a lot of people get scared to tell, like, a lot of their deep feelings naturally. And so, like, counseling is completely confidential unless, like, of certain circumstances. So, like, a lot of people will feel more comfortable going if they know that their, like, deep thoughts are not going to be exposed to anybody. And then also, like, normalize counseling. It really, honestly, is not a crazy thing. I think, like, it does not have to be a weird thing. Like, people need help sometimes, and like talking out your problems is a natural thing to do. So like the more you can just tell them that like it's not, it's not a crazy thing. Or like if you've been to counseling, like maybe tell them like, yeah, I've been before and it helped me, and it makes it more of like oh, okay, it's not a huge deal,
All the times people also say, I'll go with you, so they don't feel like they're having to go to this to counseling center by themselves and say, yeah, I'll go with you. I've been there before, and I can talk to the person you can talk to the person I've talked to, and that totally normalizes the situation. And then more on referring to counseling, use your relationship. So say, I care about you and I want you to get the help that you need, and really show them that you care about them. Because like we said, you were the first level of support for them and most influential at the beginning. So showing your support and using your relationship is huge. Some students who are close to the idea of counseling are open to a medical approach and vice versa. So what's nice is that here at Counseling Services, we can we can get our friends to go seek counseling and counseling services, and then our counseling services here is connected to Lafine. And so then all of the resources for a K-State student, we would be able to provide to them. So they all work in conjunction. Offered to call ahead and walk the student over to counseling services of Lafine. Like we had mentioned prior, I jumped ahead there a little bit. Yeah, walking with them is huge. Call the counseling center, consult if you're unsure on how concerned you should be or how you might help a particular student. Yeah, and that goes along the lines of don't do it on your own, have other people to help you, especially people who are trained psychologists in these fields, and then they can give you the best help, because none of us are professionals, we're just advocates. And then follow up with the student to see how the outcome of the referral was and how they're doing. I know for myself, that's kind of hard sometimes to balance, your own life, school, and all these people that you have to be in communication with, but really following up with them is huge, saying that you still care with them after the fact. Like, hey, how's it going? You want to get coffee? You want to talk? Showing that you're going to continue to support them past that situation is huge, and just keep in communication, which we all could probably use or work on a little bit.
So what counseling services are available to students? Yeah, the Counseling Center has mental health professionals, counselors, therapists, people who can help. All students who seek counseling or who show interest or apply, they will have an initial assessment, and then the student, from there, they'll be assigned to a counselor or a group or something such as that. The center sees around 1,600 students in a given year, so a good amount of people. And they work closely with health center staff when medication is something that's on the table. And then they also operate a crisis line. So if someone would rather just call on the phone, they have 24-hour services in that.
So as a K-State student, our counseling is obviously the counseling services. Recent news is that we have moved from the second level of the what is it?
English.
The English and Writing building. We were previously located there on the second floor. Now we are in the lower level of Lafine, and it's the side entrance facing Platt Avenue. So I don't know if a lot of people know about that, but we did recently move. It's nice to kind of consolidate and have all the health services together, because that makes it easy to work together and provide the best service to the students. And then hours of operation, Monday through Friday, 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. You can obviously call them. And all this information is also online. So after this presentation, we're going to email out the resources that we're talking about right now in the presentation. But you can also find everything online. So don't feel bad if you don't get it all down right now. Students access services via drop-in hours, 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. Urgent needs can be walked over to see a counselor. So yeah, if there's a situation where you need to go and see them right now, there are walk-ins. We have psychologists who are on staff for walk-in appointments in an emergency situation. So that's always provided to them. And then just in terms of the cost associated with it, because that's equally important, is that services are available for up to 4 free sessions for K-State students. And then past that, it's at it's not, I can't say that it's super expensive. I don't know the exact numbers off the top of my head, but if you really feel comfortable, or if the person that you're helping is really comfortable with one of the psychologists continuing to talk and work with them, it comes at a pretty discounted cost to the students. That is all on our website.
Consultation is the key. So just be cautious. If in doubt, like we've been saying, consult with others, let people know what's going on. Don't try to handle it on your own. Super important. And the counseling and testing center that we have provides telephone consultation to staff and faculty. So it's just important to know to not don't handle it on your own.
So we've kind of pushed a lot of facts at you here for the last 45 minutes or so, and given you a ton of information. We kind of started off by talking about the different forms of stress, the different risk factors, talking a little bit about depression, and then what signs of that are, and then talking about the topic of suicide and what signs of that are. And we kind of like to bring it all back together by looking at a scenario to kind of help solidify that information for you guys. We have a bunch of scenarios here on this presentation. Would be the best one for us to talk about right now. Marcos is an international student who you have known to be an energetic and interested in many activities. For the past month, he has seemed to have little energy and often appears sad. He is always dressed casually, but recently he's looked disheveled and seems not to care as much about his appearance. You don't know Marcos very well, but you've chatted several times, so you decided to approach Marcos to ask if something bothered him. He shrugs off the question and avoids you. You try one more time, and he breaks down in tears and says he cannot talk about it. What should you do next? Does anyone have any ideas or would like to participate in this? If not, it's okay.
It's like a multiple choice thing too. So
Oh, yeah. Oh, my bad. Kind of directs you there.
Yeah.
So yeah, we have 4 options. A, leave him alone. B, offer to be there for him when he wants to talk. C, call counseling center for consultation on how to proceed. Or D, offer to go with Marcos to counseling center and state that he doesn't have to talk about it with you, but that he can talk confidentially with a counselor. Who thinks they have any idea?
What do you guys think? D.
Why do you say that?
If he's not wanting to talk to you personally,
Mhm.
maybe someone in a private setting would be better. And if you walk with him, he's not alone.
Yeah. Referring him to resources who can help that he'd feel more comfortable with. Absolutely. Anyone else think anything different? These are all equally good options. At least 3 of them are. So there's no wrong answers. 1. No.
Which one do you think the wrong answer is?
Yeah, let's start with that. Yeah, A, obviously. Leaving them alone is, if we've been paying any attention to this presentation at all, isolation is bad. So they need a support system. They need a network. They need a community. So leaving them alone is a huge red flag in terms of something you should not do. So that one should have been a standout in terms of a bad answer, a bad egg. So recommendation. A combination of B, C, and D. A lot of the times in these cases, on a test that you may take that's multiple choice, A through D, there's one right answer. But a lot of the times with these, it's a range. It's a gray area. There's no right way to address these situations. But as long as you know the general risk factors and know a couple different options, you can better help them. So that's where asking questions comes into play. So where you can kind of refine and know how to best help them. And so that, how we were talking about a fork in the road, you just need to employ many of the different tools and skills you have. So there's no one right answer. Do you want to add anything to that?
I don't think so. I think that was good.
Yeah. So that kind of sums up the presentation that we have for you guys today. Just to reiterate everything that we went over, we were talking about suicide prevention and awareness. So we started by talking about the different forms of stress and the different risk factors associated with depression. We talked about the stigma surrounding the suicide topic. We talked about the different ways that you can help, the different referrals and references that we have available to us as K-State students and as college students, and the ways that we can best help them. We talked a little bit about how to initiate that conversation initially. And if you felt like we were being a little bit repetitive, things that we repeated those are the big takeaways. So if you can walk out of here knowing the big things that we'd repeated on every slide, that's the purpose. That's why we do it, is because those are the ones that you'll stick with you, and then you'll employ later on when you have to do this, if you have to do it. But yeah, that's kind of, thanks for coming. Again, my name is Matt Burnett. This is Ali Yancey. We are peer advocates for mental wellness and success that work with counseling services. This is another time for me to solicit our student group. We meet every other week on Mondays from, I think, 3 to 4, 4 to 5. My apologies. We meet every other week from 4 to 5 in Union Room. What is it? 120? What is it?
206.
206. Yeah. And then if you liked our presentation and you're passionate and interested about mental health education and awareness, we do stuff like this and a lot more. So we want an increased amount of students involved in participation, because the more people on deck, the more we can help everyone else. So, yeah.
Does anybody have any questions or comments? Anything at all that you guys want to say or ask?
I want to say thank you to you guys for coming, and thank you to everyone who clicked online and was watching us online. So we appreciate your time, and have a good rest of your Tuesday.